Thank you for joining us for Emotions Monday, where we take a look at an emotional word of the day. We define that word, we describe what it looks like in daily living, and then we decide, are we going to increase that emotion or reduce it, or even eliminate that emotion based on the outcome of how that emotion works in our life. Our emotional word for today is ashamed. This is a feeling that so many of us have had at one time in our life or another. Maybe it's a result of a quick decision that you made, or a long-term decision that you made that had heavy consequences. And sometimes it's just because there was a mistake, something that you forgot to do, or something that was broken or lost. You can still feel ashamed because that disconnects you to the person that you're trying to be connected to the person that was impacted by that event, by that thing that you forgot to do, or thing that you might have lost, or by the decision that you made. So, looking at the definition of the word, it has to do with a painful emotion that causes guilt, feelings of shortcoming, that causes impropriety or reproach to be brought to you. So, somebody will come and try to correct you, or they'll say what you did has caused them pain or has caused them loss, and that brings about feelings of shame. So the feeling of being ashamed of something that you've done, a decision, or something that happened, an event, usually can be positive, but it also can be extremely toxic and negative. When it's described in daily living, when it's positive, it's like punishing behavior that's outside the norm. So when a kid does something like hit another kid and you correct them and you tell them not to do that, they'll feel ashamed at that moment because that behavior was outside the normal expectations. Now, shame or feeling ashamed can cause you to also feel as if you've been limited, that someone's trying to control you. So when that feeling of being ashamed is toxic, that is when they're using that emotion to control the person by limiting their responses. So it's causing them to feel angry, so they don't communicate. It looks like is said to that person, and therefore they're isolated. Now they're put away from being around their peers because they're ashamed. It causes you to feel, if you're the person feeling ashamed, that your privacy has been violated. Maybe they shared what you did wrong with everyone, with your peers, with your coworkers, with your other family members, and now your privacy is violated because now other people know that you made this mistake, and now you feel as if you're being judged not by one person, but by everyone who's aware of the mistake that you made. The feeling of being ashamed causes guilt to come into your heart, come into your mind. It causes you to feel as if you're separated, as if sometimes that the person who did the right thing or the person that you're being compared to is preferred over you. Being feeling ashamed can also disguise itself, because it could disguise itself as correction, but the person is using it to make you feel oppressed, less than, or make you do something that you don't necessarily want to do, but because you feel ashamed, you feel a sense of, I have to do this to make it right. The emotion of being ashamed is one of those emotions that really can get not only under your skin, but it can affect you not only at the moment where the incident occurred, the event, the decision, or that you're being called out on something that you did that causes shame, but it's lingering. It's one of those emotions that doesn't quickly go away. It can linger and can do greater damage after it's taken place. So let's say, for example, you make a mistake at work and your supervisor lets everyone know that you made that mistake. In that moment, you will feel bad about that mistake, but then it begins to seep further, right? That thought, that emotion, that feeling stays with you, and you start to review, what could have I done differently? I can't believe that he let everybody know. Now everyone's going to think that I'm not capable. And so, with that feeling of being ashamed, now comes all these negative thoughts that come into your mind to further impacting how you feel about yourself. So, one of the things that we want to do is, because this feeling of being ashamed can be so toxic and can be so insidious and long term, we want to make sure that we start to reduce that emotion. So, reducing it by not accepting anything that doesn't belong to you. Because sometimes people will come and they'll come to correct and they'll come to change, or they'll come to point out something that you did. And you have to ask, okay, did I do that? And should I own it? Because sometimes we will accept things that we should not, because it was not just your fault, or it wasn't your fault at all, or maybe you were a partial contributor but not total contribution. And so you want to make sure that, one, does this even belong to you? Right? Should you feel guilty about something that you did not contribute to, you did not feel that you did not do, that you're not responsible for? Because there are people walking around feeling ashamed for something that was not their responsibility, something that they did not contribute to, but because the decision was made known to everyone, or because that parent, that supervisor, that person that caused that feeling of shame to even come into your mind and into your heart, said it in front of everybody, you own something that necessarily was not yours. After not accepting something that's not yours, if it is yours, you can say, okay, this is someone's opinion? Is this someone's judgment of me? And how much of this is actually valid and how much of it is not valid? Being very selective to be able to say, okay, this is true and this is not true, will help it, instead of being the feeling ashamed to the point where you feel guilty and you feel stuck and you feel immobile and you want to pull away. It's a matter of feeling guilty, understanding what needed to change, and making a decision to change that, so you can feel empowered to do things differently the next time, and not allowing that feeling of feeling ashamed to seep in and become this bigger problem, this bigger sense of failure or rejection, not allow a lot of other negative emotions to seep in because of one event. Now, if you're wondering, how do I know if this kind of feeling ashamed, if it's the toxic kind, or it's just the kind that makes me just feel like I need to make different decisions, I need to correct it, and that'll go away? Well, if it's the toxic kind, it's going to be invasive. It's going to come with negative thoughts about yourself. It's going to come with you feeling as if you can't do anything right, as if now, you've lost that relationship, lost that opportunity. Then you're going to start looking at all the mistakes you ever made and you're going to add them to this one mistake. That's when it becomes toxic. When it's something that violates who you are, violates how you feel about yourself, when you start to really think negatively, and now you're falling into not only just feeling ashamed, but you're falling into the guilt and the depression and the self-loathing. That's when you know it's becoming toxic, and that you have to change how you think and feel about yourself, so that you don't do any further damage than what was done when that person caused you to feel ashamed. That feeling of shame can also be toxic when it's tied to abuse, whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. When someone is causing you to feel shame and they're causing harm to your body or harm to your personhood, that is toxic. And that is not the kind of guilt or shame that you should ever accept, because it doesn't bring about correction. It just brings about further condemnation and pain, and exacerbates what's already been done to you and multiplies the level of trauma. And we don't want to accept anything like that in your life. How else can you reduce the feeling of being ashamed? You can become your own comforter. And when I say become your own comforter, this means beginning to forgive yourself, beginning to show compassion, kindness, love, empathy to yourself. That thing that that person is lacking in showing you, because they're trying to correct something that you've done, they're trying to highlight your mistakes, highlight your deficiencies. You can choose to not accept that, and you can choose to be your own comforter, to be compassionate, to remind yourself of all the things that you have done right, to remind yourself of how capable you are, to do the opposite of what feeling ashamed does, to feel proud of all the accomplishments that you have, of your capabilities, but to be loving and to be kind. And if something needs to change because it's not helpful, if something needs to change to have a more effective life, then you can make that change, because everyone makes mistakes. Everyone needs to grow. Everyone needs to learn. We don't come out of the womb, uh, adults that make great decisions. We learn how to make great decisions by living life and making some bad decisions. By making some mistakes, we learn what works and what doesn't work. And so offer yourself the compassion that that person that's making you feel ashamed is lacking, and begin to forgive yourself. Begin to, if something needs to be changed, make healthy changes, but don't let it get into the place where that feeling of being ashamed is seeping so far in that it's bringing a lot of other negative emotions and negative thoughts into your life. Thank you for joining us for this Emotions Monday, where we looked at the word and the feeling ashamed. And we decided that we're going to reject that emotion. We're not going to allow ourselves to feel ashamed. We're going to be compassionate, loving, kind, make changes where we need to make changes, and forgive ourselves when we fall short of something that we were trying to do. And give ourselves a new opportunity to get better, to get well, and to be successful. Thank you till next Monday.